Hello.
Welcome to the Halloween edition of Zelf on the Shelf. It's me, Donnie Osmond, as Joseph in the Technicolor Amazing Dreamcoat or whatever. I confess I have never actually seen it. You're not, bro, Jiden.
Realistically, I cannot keep this garb on for the whole video, so...
Senator Sanders, you
take
have
it
done
in.
your due diligence for this people.
Thank you.
You can remove your accoutrements.
On Saturday, I'm going to wear it with fishnets, so it's sexy Bernie Sanders. But
Oh, yeah.
this is my phoning it in version for you guys.
Yeah.
Only the best.
My
Okay,
costume
cool.
was called I Happen to Possess a Technicolor Dreamcoat, and it made costuming very simple.
Yeah. I was not worried about you putting a costume together last minute. I hope this isn't too rustly throughout the video.
Might be.
Like, I might just take it off.
You want
Would anyone judge me?
it? Are you guys going to judge? And I'm just going to be here dressed up looking like a fool by myself?
Well, today we're finally going to talk about Reed Smoot, which we've never talked about on Zelf on the Shelf, but Tanner did write a blog post about it for our website that we used to have.
Aeons and aeons ago. Yeah, that needed to go.
Yeah, that was oppressive.
So for those of you who do not know, there was once a Mormon senator named Reed Smoot who, upon being confirmed to the Senate, actually had to appear before a congressional hearing to see if he was fit to hold office.
Was he an apostle?
He was an apostle.
Okay.
Yeah, a Mormon, actual apostle. Yeah, I forgot to mention that. And so people are like, well, yeah, back in the day, the Mormons were making covenants to, avenge the blood of Joseph Smith on the United States of America.
They were.
That kind of thing. It's like when Mitt Romney was potentially going to take office and people are like, is somebody who covenanted to, slit their throat and cut their bowels if they ever talked about this, are they really fit to lead the people, or are they always going to defer to the president of the Mormon Church? Good questions.
Reasonable, though not dissimilar from, honestly, most politicians throughout American history. They've all had batshit views about something or other,
Yeah, it's true. So Mitt Romney wants to eat the rich. Eat the poor.
I wish.
Now, what's actually most interesting about these hearings is not necessarily the ones from Apostle Senator Smoot, but from Joseph F. Smith, remember the F, who was summoned to appear before Congress. If this had been in the era of television, it would have just been a hoot, I bet.
Mm-hmm. People would have been tweeting.
Yeah, instead they just drew, really interesting cartoons of Joseph F. Smith looking like a totally crazy fundamentalist prophet, which...
Is this better?
No, it's very bright on this side. Okay, so the first exchange is between a Mr. Taylor and President Joseph F. Smith, wherein Taylor asks what position he is. He says president of the church, and Taylor says, is there any other description of your title than mere president? Now we know that they're sustained as prophets, seers, and revelators, and President Smith says, no, sir, not that I know of. Taylor immediately, are you a prophet, seer, and revelator? And then President Smith says, doesn't say yes. Instead says, I am so sustained and upheld by my people.
What's the source on this? Is this just court documents that are made available to everyone?
Yes, and you can sift through just a word-by-word commentary of the entire court proceedings. This is a condensed version of that where I've picked out some of the highlights. Cool. Because I figure most people don't want to go through it all.
So Congress published this?
Yeah.
The notes, okay.
This is public record. He just goes on to say that they're all sustained, really backing away from I'm not actually a prophet, I'm not actually an apostle, I'm just sustained that, it's on paper only. And if you think that's sort of a cynical view on this, wait till I read the rest. So, Senators McComas and Hoare begin questioning Joseph F. Smith. Do you want to, read it together?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so do you want to be McComas and,
Sure.
and Hoare?
Yeah, I'll be the two senators who are questioning him.
Cool.
I should like to ask one question. You say that the counselors are appointed by the president of the church. How are the apostles selected?
In the first place, they were chosen by revelation. The council of the apostles have had a voice ever since in the selection of their successors.
What vacancies occurred thereafter? By what body were the vacancies in the 12 apostles filled?
Perhaps I may say in this way, chosen by the body, the 12 themselves, by and with the consent and approval of the first presidency.
Was there a revelation in regard to each of them?
No, sir, not in regard to each of them. Do you mean in the beginning?
I understand you to say that the original 12 apostles were selected by revelation.
Yes, sir.
Through Joseph Smith.
Yes, sir, that's right.
Is there any revelation in regard to the subsequent ones?
No, sir. It has been the choice of the body.
Damn, that's interesting. You're just admitting that the apostles are not chosen by revelation. That feels huge.
This is President Joseph
To
F.
this
Smith.
day, what church member doesn't assume that revelation is involved in choosing the quorum of the 12 apostles?
Testifying before Congress that the
Wow.
apostles are not chosen through revelation.
But then while also believing himself that Joseph Smiths were chosen by revelation, which is interesting. So like
Because at this time, so Brigham Young openly acknowledged not having been visited by angels, not having visions, not, nothing like that, no spiritual gifts. This was at a time when it was like, Joseph Smith did it all. He set it up for us. And now the church is kind of like really put more stock in the actual, like the living president of the church as like, he's got it all. And they've created this like aura of mystique about them and their gifts.
Yeah.
But they also haven't.
Yeah, of course.
Okay,
So Joseph F. Smith said, no, sir, it's been the choice of the body. Then the apostles are perpetuated in succession by their own act and the approval of the first presidency.
that is right.
Okay, so none of the apostles were chosen by revelation. Wonderful.
That alone is just a huge.
Huge. Oh my God.
Okay, so President Smith goes on to say, I will say this, Mr. Chairman, that no revelation given through the head of the church ever becomes binding and authoritative upon the members of the church until it has been presented to the church and accepted by them.
Well, we know that's not true.
Well, I guess unless we're just openly admitting that the church doesn't act by revelation at all, which, spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Because the idea right now is that whatever the church does, great or small, is a result of revelation, right? It comes down the revelation pipeline, just trickling down. And he's saying that it has to be approved and accepted. And of course, we know that that doesn't happen in the church at all.
And then Worthington says, what do you mean by being presented to the church?
Presented in conference.
Do you mean by that the church in conference may say to you, Joseph F. Smith, the first president of the church, we deny that God has told you to tell us this?
They can say that if they choose.
Sure they can. They can say it?
Yes, sir, they can. And it is not binding upon them as members of the church until they accept it.
Until they accept it?
Yes, sir. So if there's a rule, if you haven't voted on a rule in the church, don't worry about living it. You can't be held against you unless you accepted it in conference. Do you remember the word of wisdom ever being ratified in conference? You remember that?
It's also interesting because, then he wasn't the prophet back then, but when he was an apostle, Russell M. Nelson said that the LGBT policy that banned the children of gay people getting baptized came as a revelation, didn't he?
Yeah.
There was no vote on that.
No.
So someone's lying.
And then they backtracked.
And then they backtracked.
This is a revelation. I mean, it wasn't.
JK. Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, so they continue. The chairman says, you have revelations, have you not?
Joseph F. Smith, prophet, seer, and revelator of the LDS Church. I have never pretended to, nor do I profess to have received revelations. I never said I had a revelation, except so far as God has shown me that the so-called Mormonism is God's divine truth. That is all. Again, he had been the president of the church for about 20 years at that point.
Oh my God. And there's no way he was ever trying to dampen members' belief that he was receiving revelation. It's not like he was ever, he's never said that before here. It's just suddenly it becomes necessary for him to say it before Congress because he perceives it would be advantageous to tell the truth.
Yeah, and because no one in Utah is going to hear about it. It's not like it's being recorded.
Of course, I forget.
Just say whatever you want.
Things went down differently back then, didn't they?
So he's definitely trying to be hey, we're not that crazy. I'm not getting revelations. I'm sustained as that. They were originally chosen that way, not so more anymore. I'm just a fine, chill guy.
But he did say that God has shown him that Mormonism is truth.
Yeah.
And then the chairman says, you say that was shown to you by God?
by inspiration.
Oh my God. Come on.
He had a warm fuzzy about it, therefore...
I was inspired to get pie hole today. How by inspiration? Does it come in the shape of a vision?
The things of God knoweth no man but the Spirit of God, and I cannot tell you any more than that I receive that knowledge and that testimony by the Spirit of God.
You do not mean that you reached it by any process of reasoning or by any other method by which you reach other conclusions in your mind, do you?
Well, I have reached principles. That is, I have been confirmed in my acceptance and knowledge of principles that have been revealed to me, shown to me, on which I was ignorant before by reason and fact. So, when asked directly if he received revelations, he said no. He doesn't get visions. His testimony didn't come because he saw Jesus in the temple.
So nothing separates him from the average member of the church.
Nothing.
What is the point?
Or the average just human being.
being.
Because they've done like literal scientific studies on intuition and inspiration and all the things that literally everybody in humanity feels about certain things, whether true or not. Like, he's just saying, yeah, he's no better, more special of a witness than literally anybody.
Which I know we know, but just to see someone, to see the prophet of the church being just openly saying that, thinking he's going to get away with it. Well, I guess he did back then. Okay, so it continues. What was the last revelation that came to the church from the one authorized to give it as the law of the church?
Well, according to my best recollection, it must have been about 1882. The purport of the revelation was calling to the apostolate or apostleship 2 men who are named in the revelation.
What was the president through whom that revelation came?
President John Taylor.
You say that was the last one?
I do not now recall any since then except the manifesto.
So it's basically just like that was the last time someone was bold enough to claim that something was revelation. John Taylor was just like, yeah, that was revelation.
Yeah, and what's funny is so he's saying, again, John Taylor, in between John Taylor and Joseph F. Smith, there was a whole presidency of Wilford Woodruff, and he basically said, Wilford Woodruff didn't get any revelations.
So then he wasn't a prophet.
Except for the manifesto, I guess. The funny thing about John Taylor and him like citing him as the last one to get revelations is that John Taylor had a revelation that the church would always maintain polygamy, that it would never give it up or be removed from the earth, the priesthood would be taken away, and all the fundamentalists use that revelation as a claim of like, well, the prophet said this and you went wrong,
Can't blame him.
You can't blame him.
Okay, so then the senator says, accept the manifesto, ?
And again, the interesting thing about the manifesto...
Wasn't it not even implemented?
No, it was given as a public relations ploy.
Yeah.
It was a smokescreen.
And then
it was a way of being like, okay, we don't practice polygamy anymore. And the government's like, oh yeah. And meanwhile, they're all practicing secretly,
and
including Joseph F. Smith.
Manifesto,
and then in
right?
1904, he issued another manifesto and was like, okay, we're for real not doing this anymore because now it's we're about to have consequences.
And then the priesthood was lost from the earth, as the prophecies predicted.
It's too bad.
Okay, so Worthington says, then do I understand you to say the only revelation that has come to the church in the last 20 years is the one that says polygamy shall stop?
Since 1882?
Yes, since 1882, 21 years.
Yes, sir, I think it is.
And that revelation wasn't even carried out by the fucking people giving it.
No revelation in 20 years. What was the church
21.
doing the whole time? Just chilling, just vibing?
Isn't that the whole point? That's the whole point of the restoration. Prophets, seers, and revelators leading Christ's church. But no seership, no prophecies, no revelations.
Hey.
Nice.
But he's got inspiration. He got some good feelings about it. Anyway, those were some of the nuggets I dug up out of that long and arduous account. But
makes sense.
Very interesting. Very interesting what prophets say when there are no video cameras around.
Well, it's also interesting because now they also don't really claim to have revelations. Like they get up in conference and say kind of just the most beige things. Yeah, they're always asking us to believe that they've got the keys and to follow those with the keys, but then they're not, like the things that they're saying, they're giving talks that anyone in the church could give. There's nothing, they're not offering us anything.
And it's so weird.
And when the prophet is like, you should get vaccinated, everyone's like, nah.
The fastest
one
180 the
time.
membership ever did was like, we're so grateful to have a prophet, a man of science who can guide us in these last days. And then the minute he speaks out on a scientific issue, they're like, actually.
You were just a heart surgeon. You did nothing. Yeah, wow. What a smoking gun.
Yeah.
Again, not surprising. I wonder what the apologist argument for this would be. Do you think it would be like, well, they had to say that, like they were lying in Congress.
They were speaking legalese so that they couldn't be prosecuted for things they couldn't prove.
Yeah.
He stayed truthful, and he's not going to cast his pearls before swine.
Yeah, that's one way you could look at it. If you really need to hang on to that belief, that's an option you have.
Well, thank you for joining us on this episode of Zelf on the Shelf. If you enjoy content like this, please become a Patreon subscriber on patreon.com/zelfontheshelf. There you can watch special footage of us reading a 1980s Mormon romance novel, Sam.
You guys, for anyone who doesn't know, remember the movie/book Charlie that was huge when a lot of us were growing
They're
up?
like, we know you do, Charlie.
Yeah, I know that you guys know, but for the 4 of you that don't, we've been reading the sequel to Charlie, Sam, over on Patreon. It's been a lot of fun, and we're going to go do that right now. So
Woohoo!
definitely tune into that.
All right. If you ever get subpoenaed before Congress, make sure you tell the truth.
Totally.
And good luck out there.
Good
Okay,
luck.
love you. Bye.
Bye.